Welcome to this very special episode of Life, Death, and Happiness. It's called Meet the Host, and this time you get to hear my story. This podcast is all about real talks with real people. Why? Because some stories just need to be told. In each episode, I will sit down and talk with my guest about how it is to live with an incurable disease or terminal illness. But let me get this straight before we start. This is all about celebrating life. I'm your host, Daniel Cole. Welcome. Welcome back, everybody. Normally, I would take this opportunity to sit down and let the guest introduce himself, but that would be kind of silly since it's only me in this one here. It's summer vacation and it's been difficult to set up an episode with someone from the outside, and I thought maybe this was time to tell a little bit of my story. So, my name is Daniel Colt. As you know, I'm the host of the show and I'm 43 years old. I was first diagnosed with a disease called Fanconi anemia back in, it must have been 1891. I was 5 years old and I'm from 76. Yeah. That also means that back when I was diagnosed, they didn't know a lot about Fanconi anemia. When I got the diagnosis, nobody has survived yet. My parents was told that my life expectancy was about 13 years old back then, and in reality, they would lose me. That was the premises back then, and that was what I grew up with. I can't remember when or if my parents ever told me this, or if I just overheard some conversations between them and the doctors, but as far back as I can remember, I knew that this disease would sooner or later kill me. That was you can call it harsh reality. But when I was diagnosed, that was when I was around 5. The year leading up to that was kind of a weird time of my life. I was, first of all, I was only around 4 or 5 years old at that time. But they could see that there was something wrong, and they knew that my blood samples wasn't good at all. So they tried to figure out what was happening to me. They thought about leukemia and other stuff, but they didn't really go down that route. So it was I was at a local hospital, and I remember as a child, I was at the hospital for, I remember like it was like maybe a year, but in reality it was maybe 2 weeks I was in there. But, as a kid, that can seem like a long time. And I remember there was days where I couldn't eat cucumbers or other stuff, food-related stuff, because they wanted to see if me not eating those things would help my health and make my blood counts better. But we all know that if you're having anything serious, that's not the case. But they had no clue what they were doing. But I was so lucky that somehow they sent this to the University Hospital of Copenhagen Rigshospitalet, the samples, where there was a Dr. Henrik Hertz, who just happened to have a friend doctor from Paris who had something to do with Fanconi anemia. Later we come to know that these was the first experiments with doing a bone marrow transplantation with Fanconi anemia, but that was not even an issue back then. It was not reality by then, but at least he knew what it was. So we got transferred to that hospital instead, and I had soon got me the diagnosis of Fanconi anemia. Now remember, this was like 2,000 years ago, or at least it seems that way. So there was no internet, there was nowhere where my parents could go Google it and get any kind of information. They only knew what the doctors told them back then. And they called, like, I was a bleeder. That meant I was told that if I started to bleed, it just wouldn't stop like it normally would. I would keep bleeding for a long time. So I remember when my nose was bleeding, it took maybe an hour to stop it. But that was the main issues I knew about. And it was something, I can't remember exactly what was the premise back then and what I was told, but it was something like that my blood was running slower through my veins, and that meant that I didn't get all my liver, my lungs, and everything would work worse and worse over the years because it didn't get the fresh blood and like it needed. And that was kind of the story we were told back then. In reality, it has nothing to do with FA. But they didn't know a lot. They just knew these things was part of having FA. But that didn't change the fact that it became a lot worse for me within the next few years. Each Friday, I went off from school and got to the hospital with my parents to get my blood samples taken. If the count was good, it was like, you can go back to school. But if they were bad, I would go in and get a blood transfusion in the evening. I remember it as being a lot, but in reality, I think when I was 6, 7, 8, it didn't really happen at all. Maybe once or twice. But it became a lot worse when I got around 8 or 9 years old. Because at that time, my blood counts were starting to fall a lot. There was nothing positive about this. So in reality, most Fridays, and I actually got to look back at my own old medical journal a couple of years ago, and it told me that I got a bone marrow transplantation back in 1985. But when I got that, the doctors wrote that I had more than 30 blood transfusions within the last year. So if they should ever have a hope of getting me to survive, they would have to try this BMT, and it had to be now. And I remember the conversations with my parents. I don't know if they would have forced me if I said no, but they actually were sitting down having a talk with me and asked me. They tried to explain what a bone marrow transplantation was and asked me if I wanted to do this. And I know that I said yes, because or else I will die from this. I didn't know the facts behind bone marrow transplantation back then. And as a kid, now when I look back, I look upon with grown-ups' eyes. But back then, I still have this gut feeling that I knew what was going on, even though nobody had explained me how dangerous this disease was. But as I mentioned, my normal days was back then each Friday, go in, get the blood samples, go back to school. Then I got off from school and we got the counts from the hospital, and they were usually bad. So about every other second week, I would be at the hospital in the evening and sometimes from Friday to Saturday, getting these blood transfusions to get better. I've later talked to my dad, and he told me it wasn't that many times I actually had to stay at night at the hospital. But I remember it as being a lot of times. But then again, that has something to do with me being a child, probably. What I do remember is that this was my first memory of actually being a gamer. People who knows me knows I love gaming. I already had these Game & Watch games when I was a child and stuff like that. But I remember at the hospital we had an old Atari console. I can't remember which one. I can't even really picture the game for me, other than it was some Space Invasion and stuff like that. But I remember that when I got my blood transfusion, I wanted in a special place in my arm because I had figured out that if I got the needles in there, then I could actually will be able to hold the controller in my left hand while I got the blood, and then I could use my right hand to actually move the joystick. And usually we were sent to bed early at the hospital, but I remember, maybe it was only one time, but I remember it as being more than one time. I remember that one of the nurses came in the evening and was like, "But you need to go to bed now." And I was like, really sad because my parents left and they wouldn't come back before the day after. I was not so old. And I remember being like, but I really want to do this. I need this. And she actually let me sit in there for maybe it was only half an hour. I remember it as a long time. But I got to sit there and it was a way for me to doing something normal. You're a kid, you're alone in a very strange place. It's getting all dark and everybody else was going to bed. And I felt alone back then, very much alone. But this actually helped me out quite a bit to be able to sit there, and I felt that the nurse actually was listening to me. But that was just a side note or a small story about that part of me. But it mattered to me also later in life that I felt comfortable. I felt it was something I was able to do no matter how bad life was. And I actually have used that later on in life also. It has been my go-to happy place, you could call it. But it actually started back then. But again, I read my old medical journals, and I knew that they were going to try this BMT, bone marrow transplantation, and they actually ended up doing it. Because I can't remember, but I think the journal said they at least had 2 survivors in Paris with Fanconi anemia who has gone through and survived the bone marrow transplantation. So if they wanted to try it, it should be now. As I mentioned, the 30 blood transfusion within the last year. So I went into it, and I remember because that was also the first time I really thought about death, because I went in to see. Back then, you were in a glass bubble, a glass room. I don't know how big it was. It wasn't so big, but it was big enough for maybe 3 beds wide or something like that. But there was me in the bed, and I was in this glass box, and it was 2 or 3 meters high. I don't know how many feet that is, but everybody could look at me, no matter where they came from. And I had to stay in there alone. There wasn't a door. It was open in one end. I might put up a picture on Facebook in the group of this, because it was really something different back then. But I went in to see this place and to, so I was shown around, me and my parents, by the doctors who were, and I think it was Niels Jacobsen, the doctor was called, who was taking care of the bone marrow transplantation at the University Hospital of Copenhagen back then. But I went in to see this, and there were only room for 2 people back then to have a BMT at that hospital in Denmark at that time. I came in and was told that there would be room for me in about 1 to 2 months, because they just had 2 people coming in. And then we got a call about 2 weeks later that there was an opening, and we had to get in there now. And I remember that when I came in and I got into, and I was shown this glass box that I had to be in when I went through my BMT, that the guy I had actually just said hi to and met very briefly back then, I think he was in maybe 30 or 40s. Can't remember that exactly, but he was gone. And that was my first time. I knew this could kill you. But as a kid standing there and knowing that there was room for me now because he passed away, that was something I didn't know how to deal with that back then. But then again, do you ever, when you're a child and you discover something like this, and that's, how do you deal with that? I don't know. As far as I remember, I just noticed it and moved on, but also know that it was a strange feeling. I can't really put the words on it, but it didn't seem right to me deep inside that there was room for me now, but at the same time I knew I had to do this. But I got my BMT, and I won't go into all the details about a bone marrow transplantation. I will say that I got my bone marrow from my sibling, one of my older brothers, Michael. I have 2, Michael and Johnny, but I got it from Michael, and I appreciate that a lot. I try to tell him every now and then, but I want to repeat it here. I am so blessed, and I feel so thankful, and I appreciate so much that I was able to get my bone marrow from you, Michael, from my brother, because else I wouldn't be here today. So it was a combination of, I feel lucky. I feel like I got a second chance in life. First of all, not many have survived with this disease at all, as far as we know. As far as we know, I was the 3rd, but that could have, something could have happened in Japan and all other places that we didn't know about. I'm just saying that was what I could read in my journal, that 2 people have survived in Paris, and really it doesn't matter how many survived. Before, the important part was they took the chance because they knew they had to, and they actually pulled it off. I came through the BMT with the help from my brother's bone marrow and the doctors who did everything they could to get the right information from Paris and use that in my BMT. So I survived that. And as a little story, I've told a little part about it before in another episode where I talked to one of the other guests who also been through a BMT. I think actually it was in the first episode with Amy. But I remember that I started to feel better when I was in there. I got my bone marrow and after being very, very sick, I started to get better. And I was so annoyed about being in there because I wanted to go home for Christmas. I got my bone marrow on the 13th of November, 85. And I was told it could take up to a few months. So when we got close to Christmas and I felt a lot better, I was like, I want to get out. I'm not going to stay here for Christmas. And my dad and my mom and even my brothers and the doctor was like, but you don't get to decide that. We will let you out when we feel it's the right time. Because it's important that we don't let you out too early. Because you might not survive that. But me being stubborn, surprise, and me being a child, back then I was like, I think it was my mom I told that, but there's no doors into here. I can actually just run off when you least expect it, because I'm going to be home for Christmas. That was sort of such an unfair thing to do, but what can you do? You're a child. And maybe even a bit spoiled because of all of this. Not maybe. I was spoiled because of that, let's be honest here. But it wasn't fair to put my mom in that situation. I bet she did not sleep very much around that time because I said something stupid like that. So, sorry, Mom. I know you're not here anymore, but if you can hear me up there, so sorry. But again, I was a child and I wanted to go home for Christmas. Show me a child who wouldn't feel like that. I mean, come on. But I got home for Christmas. I was so lucky, and I feel I can't stress enough how much I appreciate everything people did for me back then, because they didn't have to do this, and they knew there was a big chance I wouldn't survive, and they still took the chance. They took us in. They tried to explain us what it was. They tried to inform us as much as they could. They did so much to make this happen, and it did. And after that, I was like, we knew about GVHD, that it was a possibility. But as far as I remember, I didn't really get any. So I know I was still committed to the hospital a few times in the month after because I got high fever and stuff like that. But overall, I think I did pretty well. Like everybody else who got a BMT, I got fat, and I hated that. When I look at pictures back from back then, oh my God, I was a fat kid in those months. But I'm not saying that to be rude, but really, I did not look my best right there. And I know in reality it doesn't matter. It was just something I noticed the first time I really took a look as a grown-up on all these pictures. So I got my BMT, and that was a very good thing. And after that, they started like, I don't know what to call it in English or American, but it was like a group for children. It was on the top floor on the hospital where they met. They let a lot of kids meet with one or two psychologists, but it was not to do anything. We didn't talk about having a disease. It was like our chance of seeing the hospital in a brighter light. I have some positive feelings, and so they had this. They arranged that. I think it was every second week. On Wednesday evenings, we met up. We did some dinner together at the hospital, and we went to a playroom, and we just spent a few hours having fun together, not thinking about anything regarding. I mean, we had Fanconi anemia, we had cancers, we had kids dealing with all kind of serious illnesses back then. I think when I started being that group, I must have been 12 or 13. But it mattered a lot to me going there, because so far for me, hospital has been not a very pleasant experience, to be honest. But again, it's never a pleasant experience for anybody to be committed so many times to a hospital and being in that environment. I mean, it's not good and not mentally good for anybody either. I mean, but this was something positive. I get to know the other kids and their story. I later learned, I didn't think about that back then, but they actually used this for the parents too. Because my parent came and they would be like, delivered me, or be like, okay, you can stay here for these hours and I will be in another room waiting for you. But that also gave all the parents the chance to talk together. And I knew that meant a lot to my parents. They later told me that. But, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a way to connect. So I think it was a very, very smart move to do this. Because everybody had a chance to talk to like-minded people. And there's a lot of emotional stuff coming up when you go through something like this. In this group of children, I met this guy named Michael, another kid. I can't remember if he was a year older or younger than me, but it doesn't matter. I talked to him a lot, and I can't even remember what disease he had. But we bonded and became very good friends, and we enjoyed this a lot. And I remember that one time he came to me, I was like, oh, I might soon be going through that BMT too. So, but you have been through it. And I was like, yeah, I've been through it. And I talked to him about it. I talked about what we experienced in there, what I experienced in there. And I was like, you got to do this. And he was like, yeah, but I'm afraid to. And I was like, no, you got to do this, man. Look at me. I'm healthy now. I no longer have Fanconi anemia. Sorry, I believed that back then. I didn't know better. But I was like, we talked about it. I remember this conversation very much like it was yesterday. Because it kind of mattered a lot to me in life later on. Because when we were there and we talked to each other and we left that place, that playground, that room where we could play in, that was the last time I spoke to him. Because he got into the BMT, him and his parents. Again, I don't think he had Fanconi anemia. He might have had cancer or leukemia. I cannot remember. But he went in there, and in the end, he didn't make it. I remember that I was supposed to go in there and meet him while he was in this glass box having the BMT, together with my parents. And a few days before we were supposed to go there, my parents sat down and told me that he did not make it. And how do you handle that as a 13-year-old child? I don't know how you would handle it. But I feel, when I look upon it now, I feel like something broke inside of me. Because there was this grown-up who died so I could come in and get my BMT. I know it wasn't the reason he died, but it was the reason there was room for me so I could get in there and survive. And now it has also killed Michael, who I considered a very, very good friend at that time. And it came to have a big impact on my life, because later on in my late teen years, I wasn't good at handling my emotions. I did a lot of stupid stuff because I felt alone. Later on, only a few years ago actually, I learned about this term called medical PTSD, as a post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then I didn't know anything about that. You didn't think about getting help for children in the same way as you do today. So I didn't have a lot of people to talk to about this. I think as far as I remember, my parents tried. But then again, what could they do? And as a teenager, do you really listen to your parents? I don't know how it works in your life, but I did not. So I think I subconsciously tried to punish myself, because I actually told him to get this BMT. Or at least I suggested it to him. I know in reality, his parent might have forced him into it, no matter what I've said. I don't even know if it had an impact on him that I said, I think you should do it. But in a teenager brain, that was a very, very tough thing to go through and handle. even with the knowledge I have today, it's still, it has, how can I explain it? It gets me very emotional whenever I think about it. Because to me, that was the first big loss I ever experienced. And I felt it was partly my fault. So I had to deal with that. And in the same years I was told, I can't remember the year, but I was later told that I was now cured of FA, or at least I didn't have FA any longer because of the BMT. We all know that's not the truth, but I remembered that was how it was back then. I was told this, I believed in that, and I was even told that, people who knows me know I'm not very tall. That is a common thing within people who have Fanconi anemia, but I was told it was because of the BMT and the medicine I got in there. That was what me and my parents was told. I got some hormones to start in hope that I would start to grow, but the hospital made a big mistake at that time. At least I see it that way. I remember that I went to get an x-ray of I think it was my fingers, my bones, to see how long time I had left to grow in. It's something about the gap between the bones or something like that. I can't remember the details. But they were keeping an eye on me, and I got this photo taken every year. And somewhere around my teenage years, I was like, I know we took this picture half a year ago, but I feel like I have stopped growing. And they were like, yeah, you didn't really grow since the last time, but every sign is there that you will grow normally, and you will grow up until you're 18 like every other kid. That was not what happened. I was told this, and I remember me being kind of mad that I didn't feel they were listening to me. And my parents tried to back me up on this, but were like, but he knows what's going on inside his own body. But the professor in this field wouldn't have it. He was like, no, we know this. There's plenty of time. Listen to me. I remember this word about him being an expert in this. So we could rest assured that what he said was the right thing. I came in again 6 months later, and they took another picture. And it was almost closed. There were almost no time left to grow in. So I got on the hormones. I think I took them for a year, and it didn't really help anything at all. To me, maybe a few centimeters. But I'm small. I had to live with that. I was mad as hell. I was not just mad, I was furious. Because I felt they had left me down. I mean, they took me as a child, and even though I know I was a child. And this is something I have to say very clearly. Doctors have to listen to the patients. I know I wouldn't be tall no matter what. I know that with the knowledge I have today. But again, in my teen years, I've lost this friend who I recommended going into a bone marrow transplantation. And also, I was very, very short. And in my head, it was because of a mistake of the doctors. Not the doctors, one doctor. I won't name him. No need for that. But again, I think in many ways I underestimated myself. I had low self-esteem, and I was very hard on myself. So for me, that was an extremely difficult time. Today, when you have the Fanconi Anemia Research Fund, you have the Danish Foundation, you have the Fanconi Anemia Hope in England. You have a lot of these associations, the German one, all over the world. And that's very good, that's positive. But I didn't have anyone to bond with back then. Nobody to help me explain anything. I thought I didn't have FA any longer. But I had a lot of things I had to mentally cope with. So that meant in my teen years, as I said, very, very low self-esteem in many ways. So I did with the information today, everybody knows you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't smoke. You shouldn't do all these things because it's not good for your health. You shouldn't stay out in the sun too much, and you should probably run a few miles, stay in shape. I don't know. But there's a lot of rules of what you can and can't do when you have something like Fanconi anemia. And the same goes for, I know, a lot of other stem cell diseases. I didn't know about that. In Denmark, most young people start drinking at the age, back then, they start drinking around the age of 12 or 13. That was normal. You got to your first parties at that time. And I did too. And I found out that drinking kind of solved my problem. At least when I was out having a party, I didn't think too much about all the hard stuff. So I started to partying a lot at that time. I had some friends who started smoking weed. So I thought that was a mighty good idea. So I started doing that too. And I still had this problem with my self-esteem. And I had that for many years up until I maybe that sounds very weird to Americans, at least. But I always loved rap music back then. When it started out, I started listening to it around maybe 89 or something like that. I think it was because of the things I've been through in my childhood. I couldn't really relate to all the happy songs about love and happiness that was in pop culture back then. But the pain some of the rappers were talking about, because of loss and because of circumstances they didn't have a hold on, I mean, that related somehow to me. I know it's a totally different situation. I mean, the opposite side of the world, I'm white. But I still felt that pain had something in common with me and my situation. So I started rapping back then, and through that, I actually started to get some self-esteem because I was good at it. So I started to actually make friends within this environment, and I ended up being part of a group. I went on tours in Denmark and Sweden. I've tried to stand in front of 2,000 people in a crowd and hear them all yell my name, and that was pretty cool back then. That was a good part of this. It told me I was good at something. There was something where I stood out. But back then, you couldn't make a living of this. I mean, I was happy going out and doing this for a free bar and, a ticket I could go home without paying for it. I mean, that was the deal back then. But I did it, and it built up something positive in me, because I was no longer just the weirdo who couldn't do anything right. I was still the weirdo, but at least it was something I was good at. And I think no matter where you find that part of you, I mean, it's important for everybody to feel that they belong to a group and there's something they're good at. Back then, I thought it was only because I was good at rapping. I later found out that what I was actually good at was reaching people with my words. I mean, I later on came to work with gaming and stuff like that as a game journalist, and that helped me a lot. But back then, it was just me discovering that my words had an impact, and there was something I was good at. Later on, I had to step out of that life because a lot of people start doing drugs and doing all kind of crazy shit, to be honest. And even though I've known a lot of people who's probably never going to have a normal life, let's put it that way. Some of them went to jail. Some of them started doing a lot of drugs and doing all kind of crazy stuff. I never went that far, and I think that was because I came from a good family. So even though I tried to share my pain with somebody, I still had this about I had this line I just mentally would never cross inside me. But that also led to later on I had to break out of this environment. And where I'm going with this, I think it's for me. It's just saying that it's important to figure out there's something you're good at, and you need to try to find that thing, because that will get you through the hardest of the hardest time. I think that's important too, because if you're going through a lot of stuff, a lot of bad stuff, where do you find that extra energy? Because you need that for the hard times, for the really difficult times. But then again, I thought it was okie dokie, and there was nothing wrong with me. And I will make a jump here, not to bore you all with all kind of stupid details about my life, but I still drank a lot, smoked a lot whenever I had the chance, but it wasn't as bad as it was when I made music. Definitely not. It was much worse when I was in that environment. But I still like to party hard. But I started to get a better job, so I became a shop manager at a toy shop, and later on I got to work in a big company called 3. That is a mobile company, and that is where I actually met my wife. And my life was just getting better and better. I got better paid jobs. I started to gather some this big ego I have started. That started back when I figured out I was good at doing rap and doing music. But I was always sort of had a big ego, and I made a lot of fun about it. But in reality, it was only it was superficial back when I was young. Now it was actually something that I felt through my body and soul. I felt confident at that time, and I feel confident today. I know I'm a good man. I know I try to do the right things. I'm not perfect by any means. I make huge mistakes every now and then, but I know that my heart is in the right place. I know I had something to give to my wife and my son. So I'm happy about being me, and I don't feel ashamed about that. I have a big ego because it makes me actually achieve a lot of my goals. Because I will always have this, if I really want to do something, I can do it. I can provide the results. I can definitely work hard enough to reach whatever I set in front of me. But this all started because I had to do something with my life. And then I met my wife, and things was getting even better. I mean, she's the love of my life, no doubt about it. And we lived happily ever after. No, but until 2014, I thought there was nothing wrong. And then one evening I was feeling nostalgic because I lost contact to a lot of the children I knew when I grew up at the hospitals. And I was like, does anybody else exist who have had Fanconi anemia or gone through a bone marrow transplantation? And I found this Facebook group that was Danish and for people who have been through BMT. And there was this thread about people talking about their situation. Why had they been through a BMT? And I talked about my story. I was like, yeah, I used to have Fanconi anemia. I got cured back, blah, 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 blah. And about that. And I think it was 1 or 2 days after Christina. Some of you within the FA community might know her from Denmark. Very, very good friend of mine. Christina, she contacted me. I was like, I can't remember the wordings, but it was like, we really need to talk. And we did. And I got invited to the Danish Fanconi anemia group back then. It was only like 6 or 7 people at that time. And I figured, oh shit, I thought I was cured. So I had to wrap my head around that. At the same time, I've been walking around with a little thingy on my tongue. I didn't know what it was. It was like white in the middle of it. It didn't hurt. And my wife had been like, you should go to the doctor. I was like, yeah. You know, man, I'm a kind of stupid. I'm a slow learner. I was like, yeah, I'll do that someday. But in the group, they were like, if you had something like that, because I told them, you need to go see the doctor once. This could be cancer. And they gave me some PDF files they have gotten from the Fanconi Anemia Research Fund in the US. And I was like, oh shit, yes, I might have to do something about it. I went to the doctor and they made a biopsy, and it came back showing there's no cancer on this. But I had a gut feeling, just like I had a lot of times when I was young. It's like, I need to get this removed. And we ended up having let's just call it an argument, because I do have temper if I feel that I'm not treated fairly. But he was like, okay, then I will send you to the hospital and blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't anything serious, so because the result came back and told me it wasn't cancer or anything. So it took like a couple of months for me to actually get time at that hospital to go get it removed. And after that, Yes, I remember I came in to get the result. Afterwards, they have removed a small part of this lump on my tongue, and everything was good. I was just going back. I just started a new job, and I'm a gamer, so I remember this date very. I don't remember the date, but it's very easy to actually look it up, because it was the same day that the what's it called? I can't remember the name of it. Not the division. What is it called? I'll write that later down. There was a game coming out that year that I've been waiting for a long time. So I was supposed to just go pick that game up, and then I would just pass by the hospital to get the result, and then I would go home to game all night. So, but that didn't happen. I came up to the hospital, and I could see that there was standing a few nurses. It was just before they closed that day. And they went in together with the doctor, and I could see one of them holding a brochure in her hand that said, "A Life with Cancer." And my mind registered that as the doctor started to speak, and it was like being in Twilight Zone. I mean, I was just told like a few months before that I still had Fanconi anemia, even though I thought I was cured of that. And now here they were telling me I had cancer. I didn't know how to react to this, but they told me that they would have to send me again to the State University Hospital, who had also taken care of my BMT back then. They would transfer me to that hospital, and I didn't know what to do. I went out in the car. I wanted to start the car, but I was sitting there. I didn't know what to do. So I called home. I called my wife, and I can't even remember if I gave her an explanation. I was just like, I don't know what to do. I have cancer. I was just told by the doctors, I'm not going anywhere. I'm coming straight home to you. Because I don't know. I can't remember if she had some questions at that time. She must have felt awful just getting that phone call. But I didn't know what to do. I had this 35-minute drive home, and I was out of my mind. But I had to start the car and go there. And I actually I had to pull the car over on the way. And I was actually writing in the Danish Fanconi anemia group, so shit, this is actual cancer. I can't remember if anybody answered. They probably did, because they usually do whenever we talk, and if any of us have a problem, people usually go help at once if they can. But I came home, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, am I going to die now? My mom died of cancer back in 2007. And it went very fast from her feeling really, really bad to us standing at her funeral. It just took, as far as I remember, 3 months or something like that. So that was my main experience with cancer. So I just had this thought of how quickly it got ugly with my mom. And I was like, I have cancer. At that time, I was dating my wife, but she hadn't become my wife yet. And I was out of my mind. I didn't know what to do. Suddenly I had FA again. Suddenly I had to deal with cancer. I thought my life was over. I hoped it wasn't. I would fight the living hell to survive. But this was such a new world to me that I had to deal with these kind of things. So that night, a good friend of mine who just went on pension, actually Ralph from Germany, a man, I won't go into a long story with him, but he has mattered a lot to me and a lot of other people. He actually took the time to call me from Germany, and we talked for a long time. He tried to explain everything regarding the type of cancer I had, and how to try to deal with it. And he answered all my questions surrounding Fanconi anemia, and that meant a lot to me. But I had to go to the surgery and get this cancer removed from my tongue, hopefully. And they also took some of the lymph node from my left side of my neck at the same time, just to be sure. And I went to it, but I still thought because when I got the first little part of my tongue removed, it was like in and out in 5 hours. I came in, they did a small surgery, blah, 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 moved out. I was still, okay, I'm scared, but it can't be that bad. You just have to remove this little thing off my tongue completely. But I woke up there with, and I looked like a mess, to be honest. My face was all swollen, my neck was swollen, I felt like shit. And I woke up, and it kind of scared me when I saw myself in the mirror, because I didn't picture it being that bad. Even though I was scared of, when they told me you have cancer, I still couldn't really cope with it. I didn't really believe in it. It's difficult to explain. I got the surgery, and when we came back a few weeks later to get the result, they were like, this did not remove all the cancer out of my mind. And I called Ralph, and he actually we made a deal that he came to Denmark and helped me get the last talk to the doctor who would do the surgery. So he was sitting there helping me out, and also then I would give them permission to take the part of my tongue that they needed, because they would actually cut out the whole left part of my tongue to be sure to remove the cancer. And I made a deal with him that they could get this for science. So they could take this piece of my tongue to a lab in Netherlands afterwards. Kind of a weird deal now that I think about it. But hey, if it helps somebody else down the line, it helps somebody else down the line. So I would gladly give. If they remove anything from me to cancer or anything else, please, man, use that part. Use that part for science. That's how I look upon it. But I got the second one, and they actually cut the left part out of my tongue. And I don't know if you know that. I didn't know that. I was scared like beep when they told me they had to cut the left part out of my tongue. Because as I mentioned earlier, I had figured out in my growing life that, and that was also my professional jobs I had, taking care of quality control and other stuff for a company. I was good at words, speaking words. So what would happen to me if I lost my tongue? Would I ever be able to speak again? Now that scared me way more than having cancer. What if I would never be able to communicate with my wife in the same way? My family, my friends. Now that was scary to me. But I didn't know, and the doctor told me, and I was glad he did. It was like, do you know that the tongue of a human is almost like the tail of a lizard? And I was looking at him like, are you kidding me? What the hell are you talking about? But in reality, that's the truth. When you cut out like the left part of the tongue, as they did to me, if they don't sew the last part together and they let the wound be open, the tongue will start to grow out again. My tongue does not look nice today. The tip of my tongue is actually more in the left side because it didn't really grow together that well. But I can speak. It took a lot of practice for me to learn to speak better. But I mean, I can hear it every day. If I listen to my own voice, I know that it doesn't sound as it used to be, as it used to. I can hear the differences, but most people can't. And they probably wouldn't notice. But I know that my tongue is not really nice, and it's not like it used to be. But at least I can talk, I can do the podcast, I can do everything I love. So in that way, I've been lucky. So I will move into this part this was about my life. And I will talk shortly about death, because that's also part of this. And just because it's myself on the line, I won't throw that out of the window. Because I've been thinking a lot about death since I got my re-diagnosis of anemia, or whatever you want to call it. Especially because after we tried for many, many years, and with the help of a donor, I got a baby boy last year in October. Little Falky. And I love my wife, but he's so great. I can't say if I love him more, my wife more, but they're so important to me. I mean, even when I speak his name like this, I can almost feel like a tear coming because it's the best thing that happened to me. I never thought. I mean, I was always told I couldn't get children. And that's a fact. That's nothing I can do about it. But I helped my wife pick the donor. We did all this together. And we went through her whole pregnancy. And we got him. And everything has been really well. Oh my God, I love that little boy. But it's also got me thinking a lot about what will happen to him and my wife when I'm no longer here. Because I know as a fact that none of us so far survived Fanconi anemia. Only very few people are getting into their 60s. I don't know if it's only 1 or 2 worldwide. I don't know. A very few people reach their 50s, and I'm in my 40s. I'm 43 years old. I cannot allow myself to not think about these things and not to try to plan for a future without me. And maybe that sounds a bit dark to some, but I've been sitting down with my wife and we talked about how I want my funeral, how I want a lot of things to be done. We are trying to put money aside for the funeral, so it will be easier for her when that time comes. I know it's not going to be easy at all. I'm not trying to tell you that. But where I'm at right now, I feel it's difficult because I have a lot of things in life I want to do, and I will do them. I do this podcast, and I will do a lot of good stuff. I mean, just because I can't stop working on new projects. I did it for 3 years after I got my cancer because I got afraid of living. And at that time, actually, I have a very good brother in Michael. I remember I was helping him doing some stuff a couple of years ago. And he was like, oh, but what are you going to do now? And I was sitting there talking about all the things I couldn't do. And he was like, suddenly looked at me and was like, now I get you. You do? Yeah. You stop caring about living now. So, you might as well just die, according to what you're saying. And that struck me. I was like, no, I don't want to die. But he said, but you keep telling me all the things you can't do in life. That's not living to me. And it hurt. It hurt as F-U-C-K. But it made me realize that I cannot let Fanconi anemia or the fear of getting cancer again, which I most probably will experience. I cannot let that control me. But the fear of dying, it kept me back from doing a lot of stuff that I in reality wanted to do. So, to me, death is a difficult topic because I know it's going to happen to me. I know it's not going to be pleasant. It's probably going to be painful, to be honest. And I wouldn't want that for my worst enemy. I wish, like everybody else, that I would someday sleep in with my wife beside me, holding hands, all that stuff. Even though that could be romantic and, oh my God, I wish I could experience something like that. I know it's not realistic. And I have to deal with that. I have to, and even though I've started working on a lot of new projects, I'm running with 200 miles per hour. Don't give a flying beep what other people say. I'm going to live my life. I'm going to have some great experience. I'm going to try to help other people. I'm going to do a lot of positive. And I'm doing it. I'm working hard to do it. But I still have this fear inside me. And that fear is very, very real to me. If I feel a pain somewhere and it don't go away within a few weeks, because of the Fanconi anemia, because I know of a high risk group of getting cancer, it's always about, is this the time? Is this now? Is this the start of the ending? I don't let this part control me, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel this way every now and then. And when I look upon my son, it's very, very positive, very happy. And oh my, right now I'm actually on vacation in Los Angeles in the US with him. And I love to be able to spend 24 hours a day with him. Normally I can't do that because of work and stuff. And I love this part. And also every now and then when I look at him, I can get all sad. And now, even when I think about it now, I hate to say that, it almost makes me cry, because I know I will probably not get the chance to see him at his 10 years birthday, or him going out of school, graduating, him getting his first work, his first girlfriend, all that stuff. I know it's probably not very realistic. It doesn't mean I won't fight the living crap out of it to experience these things. But when I get these thoughts, it makes me sad. I think that's a very natural thing. So what I'm trying to say with all this, I do believe we have to live our lives. I will do it, and I will probably break all the records and become the first Fanconi anemia patient who became 100 years old. I mean, I'm stubborn enough. But death is something I frequently think about, because of where I am in life, and because I know it's something I have to gonna face. And it probably ain't gonna be pretty. But let me turn this around. Get to the last topic of happiness. Because what is happiness to me? Happiness is me making a project and seeing other people enjoying it. Happiness to me is a good meal with my wife, with nobody else around. Happiness is to lay on my stomach singing a song for my son. I see him smile. It's making, in reality, this podcast is part of it too, because it makes me, it gives me the chance to deal with these things, get it out of my system. Because even though I can be emotional when talking about these things, it also means that the next many days after, I don't think about it for a second. I kind of gets it out of my system. But happiness to me is knowing that my wife and my son can still be happy after I'm gone. Hopefully they have a good experience looking back upon. So what makes me happy is to make them happy, to get them to smile, to tell my dad that I love him, to tell my brothers that I love him, the same with my nephew and nieces, try to get some good experience with them, try to have some fun. But in reality, it's the small stuff. I mean, as I mentioned, getting a good meal, watching my son start crawling for the first time. Hopefully soon he starts walking too. All these small things makes it worth it. Happiness. It's such, when I came up with the idea about the podcast, it was very important for me to keep this in the podcast, because I want people to know that happiness can be achieved even though you have a terminal illness or chronic disorder, anything that might have very, very serious impact on your life. And happiness is important. It's the driving force behind everything I do. I can't do things out of the fear of death, but I can do things in the pursuit of happiness. So to me, happiness, I have to chase that. I can't sit around here at home, being in my bed and expecting happiness to come face me. I gotta create happiness. I gotta create happiness within myself. And that is sometimes to lower my expectancy to about some things in life. I will probably never become a millionaire. That's all right. I don't really care about that. I love positivity. I also love to be realistic. So I know what the facts is about my life and my condition and where I'm at. But positivity and happiness to me is to allow yourself to see the good stuff around you, not just allowed you to, but you can always focus on something negative. That's not hard. I could spend my whole life focusing on the people I've lost, the friends who's no longer here, the children I've seen at the hospital who's very, very sick, the Fanconi anemia children we lost, the pain their parents must go through. And it's all inside of me. It's all part of me. But I have to look upon the positive side too. I have to think about those who makes it, those who have some good experiences. When I see a young child with some terminal disease having a great experience, it makes me happy for them. I mean, maybe they don't live to become 50 years old, but if they can have some really, really great experience, isn't it better to have a life that is only 30 years and is full of happiness than living to your 70 and feel miserable? I mean, take your chance in life. Do whatever you want to. I mean, there's a lot of things in life that I try to just do. I don't have the best fantasy in the world, to be honest. But right after I came out, I had the cancer, I got cured of that part. One of my friends was like, do you want to go fishing at a lake? I was like, I'm not the fishing type of guy. He was like, come on, what do you got to lose? And I was like, yeah, shit, what do I got to lose? And we actually had such a wonderful full day together, just sitting out there. Later on, he also made me go out. He's a very wildlife dude. So I was out sleeping in the trees in the forest at night. I would never have done that before. But I've become more open to these experiences. If people come up and be like, hey, we should try this. In most situations, I'm like, yeah, why not? I mean, I haven't got anything to lose other than I might get a smile on my face. I might get this good feeling. If it makes you feel good, I want to experience that too. That was a lot of words. Happiness to me is to be able to do what I want to do and be around the people I love. My wife, my family, my son, my dog, the people I connect well with, people who I see as friends. If they're doing well and we find some happy moments together, that's happiness to me. Happiness can be a barbecue night with some people you love. It doesn't have to be anything big. This was your chance of meeting the host. I tried to get into more details about my situation. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I will continue to make this podcast for as long as I can find people who will participate, and I will do it for as long as I human possibly can, because there's a lot of great life stories out there. I want to hear them. I want to hear people be able to tell their stories. Why? Because in the future, people might be able to learn from it. And people might get to know that they are not necessarily alone with these feelings and these experiences. So that is kind of my hope for the future regarding all this. Right now, I can feel I'm very emotional right now because I don't normally talk about these parts of my life and my hopes, fears, and dreams. But I hope you, if you didn't enjoy it, at least appreciate it. I've tried to be as honest as I can. I will be back in 14 days with a new guest. This time around, I will say thank you for listening. Take care, and see you soon. Thank you for listening to tonight's episode of Life, Death, and Happiness. If you like this, please do us a big favor and head over to iTunes, Overcast, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast from, and subscribe to us. If you also give us a good rating, it will help us a lot reaching much more people, so I will appreciate that a lot too. Also, you can of course follow us on Facebook and Twitter and help us spread the word through there. My name is Daniel, and thank you so much for listening.